On a more modern level, Adrian Tchaikovsky, I'm completely in awe of his output.
Are there any other authors that you would like to suggest to the audience watching today that you think we might all enjoy?
Yes, I mean, Gareth Powell is a phenomenal space opera writer. Aliette de Bodard, her science fiction and her fantasy are phenomenal. Laura Jean McKay, I've only read one of her books. It's the one that won the Clark Award last year, The Animals in That Country. That is a sublime and weird piece of fiction. It's very, very good.
As many of you know by now, I spoke with a lot of authors this year: Tchaikovsky, Rambo, McDonald, Bryn, Bear, Watts, Barnes, and others, and I've been sharing parts of these interviews over the past month or two in the hopes, of course, of entertaining you while also providing more author and book recommendations for you. Here's what I was told when I asked authors about other authors that influenced them or dazzled them. I asked the author of the amazing Children of Time, Children of Ruin, and soon-to-be-released Children of Memory, Adrian Tchaikovsky, is there an author that influenced you as a writer or has had an impact on your writing career?
Yeah, so the author who's influenced me most has got to be Diane Wynne Jones. So I came across her work when I was 13, 14, and she absolutely blew my mind because her books have some of the most sublime twists and turns. And it's something that happens a lot in adult fiction. It doesn't necessarily happen a lot in fiction written for sort of mid-grade or young adult readers in the same way, but she really did just keep you guessing. She would flip your understanding of what was going on in the book, and then she would do it again sort of 5 or 6 chapters later. And that was really a masterclass in what you can do in a book.
Cat Rambo is the author of the recently released space opera You Sexy Thing, and I asked her, what authors influenced you as a writer or impacted your writing career?
I want to say that one of the people that's really influenced me in terms of, I think, kind of my approach to the industry and sort of writing at large, and that's been Michael Swanwick, who was one of my Clarion West teachers and who is just kind of delightful, and post Clarion West became the repository for my angst. Where just like every 6 to 12 months, I would mail him and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah. And he would kind of send back something that boiled down to, well, you should just keep writing. And I'd be like, oh, okay, that's what I need to do, and keep on going.
Ian McDonald doesn't name names, but he does write amazing science fiction. He also wins awards. McDonald, the author of The Dervish House, River of Gods, Brazil, and many other great novels, is a 6-time winner of the BSFA Award and has won Hugo, Philip K. Dick, John W. Campbell, Theodore Sturgeon, and Locus Awards. Ian McDonald will be releasing his next novel, Hopeland, early in 2023. Is there an author that influenced you as a writer or influenced your writing career?
I wouldn't say any one author. To be honest with me, and I think maybe with all writers, everything influences everything that's happening at a certain time. It could be what's happening on television. It can be what's happening in comics, what's happening in books you read. Writers always kind of respond to the zeitgeist. Gosh, that's a $10 word in different ways. So for me, it's not one particular writer, but what a lot of writers, what a lot of comics artists, what a lot of filmmakers are all responding to at the same time. For me, it's kind of writing and creativity has always been a social rather than an individual thing. So I'm kind of dodging the question there, but it's the most honest answer and most accurate answer I can personally give.
I'm currently rereading Cordwainer Smith's brilliant novel, Norstralia. Also a fan of Cordwainer Smith is the author of the new release, Stars and Bones, Gareth Powell.
Cordwainer Smith, his tales, some of them, like Golden the Ship was 000, and The Game of Rat and Dragon, they're just so creative. And on a more modern level, Adrian Tchaikovsky, I'm completely in awe of his output.
I recently finished reading and reviewing, you can see them on my channel, the novels Beta and The Thing Itself by Adam Roberts. I also plan to read his novels Jack Glass and Salt. Can you guess what I asked him? Are there any authors who have influenced you or influenced or impacted your writing career?
Yeah, there are a lot, and I would say it's a strange and a slightly mixed bag. And if I start kind of just listing names, then it's going to sound a bit weird. When I was growing up, I was reading all the time. It was Roald Dahl, not his children's books, which I also read, but he wrote a bunch of adult, in inverted commas, short stories. And it was reading those that made me think, oh, I'd like to try and do this. I mean, he's not a science fiction writer. None of these stories are genre. But then when it came to me trying to write myself, it was the writers that I was reading at the time who really got under my skin that I was kind of imitating. So one of those was Chris Priest, and I read all his early 1970s novels in their pan paperback covers. Another would be Ursula Le Guin and her science fiction, but also her fantasy. And yes, I suppose, I mean, Asimov, I read all of Asimov as a kid. But one of the things I knew I was interested in doing from the beginning was something a bit more stylistically ambitious than Asimov does. Asimov's prose is all kind of grey utility prose, and that was a deliberate decision he made as a writer. He wanted to communicate as directly as possible with his readers. He didn't want to do fancy pants purple prose that would put off a lot of readers, and I kind of respect that, but that's not really what I'm interested in doing. So then I discovered, and this is going to sound a bit odd as well in a science fiction discussion, but I discovered Vladimir Nabokov, the Russian writer, the Russian-American writer, and he's such a master of the sentence, of just being able to write an extraordinary, beautiful sentence. And he's been a direct influence on what I'm trying to do, which is to write a kind of pulp science fiction with a slightly Nabokovian sensibility. And there aren't many people doing that. Maybe Mike Harrison, M. John Harrison, who's also a kind of Zen master of prose. Every single sentence is doing something remarkable. And if I'm honest, I think that's a little out of fashion at the moment. I think what most readers want now is a prose style that doesn't get in the way of them accessing the story, finding out about the characters and how they interact and what's going on, discovering the world of the, however that world is being built, the cool ideas. And I perfectly respect that. I think that's absolutely fine. And I think it's one of the things that may have held me back from a kind of broader success. I'm probably kidding myself. My broader success has been held back by the fact that I'm just not very good, but it is.
Rachel Aukes is the author of the exciting action sci-fi thrillers 100 Days in Deadland, the Waymaker Wars series, the Fringe series, and many more. Is there a science fiction author who has influenced you as a writer or influenced or impacted your writing career?
Yes. And like with all my answers, I'm not good at coming down with just one. So I would say there's two that I'll mention today. One is Jonathan Mayberry. He has written in almost every genre, but within science fiction, he has the Joe Ledger kind of science fiction horror series. It's thriller, love him. He's done a lot of different comics, you name it. But I was fortunate enough to meet him at a convention a while back, and he has taught me a lot. He was a kind of an informal mentor, a friend. And when I was just starting out, he gave me a chance for a short story in an anthology. So he's someone that without a doubt has influenced my career as a writer. And he's just an all around good person. He's been fantastic. So, and then the second one I'd say is Joe Haldeman, who anyone in science fiction should know from the Forever War. So we attend the same conference in Iowa every year. So I've had a chance to get to know Joe and his wife, Gay. And I've seen them now for 10 years running. And they are the most generous, kind, and wise people when it comes to publishing and science fiction in general. And you name it. I have asked them all sorts of different things, and they always have good, wise answers. So I cannot say there is a better science fiction couple out there.
Having just finished the thing itself, loving it, and having 1,000 questions about what I just read, I wish I would have picked his brain about it even more. Here's Adam Roberts again. One of the books I'm reading at the moment certainly fits into that category of not conventional. Is it fair to assume some of those classic books that you grew up with based on just some references in here would be Dune, Dune Messiah, that whole series, War of the Worlds. Would that be a fair assumption?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, when I was a teenager, these were huge for me. I read them over and over again. I still read them, and that kind of tradition of Frank Herbert and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, and also the British writer Christopher Priest, who I discovered as a teenager, had something of that effect. And yeah, so the thing itself is, amongst other things, a kind of fix-up novel, or it takes the form of a fix-up. It's not actually a fix-up. A proper fix-up is the science fiction writer has published all these short stories, as Asimov did with the Foundation series, and then reuses them and stitches them together to make a kind of novel. And I find that form really interesting and really kind of powerful and wonderful. And I've in several of my novels, I've tried to ape that, to try and copy that. And that's what I do in the thing itself. So it's not all the different chapters are all written in different styles. And some of them are trying to capture that energy and that kind of wonder of pulp and golden age science fiction.
Stacey Cade writes in many genres and also writes science fiction under the name S.A. Barnes. Most recently, she penned the hit sci-fi horror novel, Dead Silence. Is there an author who influenced you as a writer or has impacted your writing career?
Well, Linnea, obviously, she is known in the science fiction and fantasy community. She is a science fiction romance writer. She has a bunch of books, and I was very fortunate to meet her at the beginning of my career. And she still reads for me and offers me feedback. And she's the one that I contact because she and I write very differently. And she has like schematics of ships and things, like all of this like world building and all of these, different religions and languages and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I need 6 rooms because these things are happening. And then I figure out the rest of it later. So she's the person I call when I'm like, okay, I need help because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how the science fiction part of this all fits together in this larger world. And she's amazing at that, at everything, honestly. And the other one I would say is actually in terms of my latest release would probably be Blake Crouch, who wrote Dark Matter. Never met him. I love his books. But honestly, reading Dark Matter kind of sort of clicked something in my brain. Like, I want to do this because one of the things I really liked about that book was I feel like sometimes science fiction can be off-putting to people because it feels too technical or too complicated, or people perceive it that way. And I really liked Dark Matter because I felt like it was accessible to people who may not even normally read science fiction. And so that's kind of what I wanted to do, both with science fiction and horror, was make it accessible to more people than would normally just automatically read those genres.
That's really great, and I thought that too when I read Recursion and Dark Matter. It's so easy to recommend to folks because those of us who read a lot of science fiction, there's the sci-fi. But if it's something you're not used to, it does feel really accessible, and it feels like you'll get away with the recommendation, and it usually comes back with, wow, I really like that, and I wasn't sure I was going to like science fiction.
Exactly, and I find that a lot when I was working. I wrote YA before, young adult novels, before I wrote Dead Silence, and I find that happens a lot with teens or with teen girls in particular, is they get a little skittish. And so I feel like between middle grade and YA, we sort of lose some of them. So I feel like if you can remind younger readers, particularly younger female readers, that science fiction is fun. And remember, this didn't bother you when you were in 6th grade, but now you're coming up, you're in high school, you're out of high school. This is still a fun thing. There are still awesome stories to be told. It's not necessarily all about this war and that technology. Like, it's accessible in a different way emotionally. I think that's one of the things that Blake Crouch did really well, was there's an emotional, through line in all of his stories that make you care about the characters. Even if you're kind of like, okay, there's this other sci-fi stuff going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you feel like that in the library there is sort of that feel of like, oh, science fiction, that's for boys, that's not for me? Is that a prevailing idea?
I think that they wouldn't say it, but I think that that's something that I rarely see. They're far more inclined to check out fantasy, and I think that's because the latest trend in fantasy, I'm thinking of like Sarah Moss, of Holly Black. I'm trying to think of other recent authors. There are emotional arcs, there's romance, it's a focus on relationships in those stories. And I feel like sometimes, not always, but sometimes science fiction sort of loses track of that, or it can. And I think the YA authors working in science fiction are fantastic. Beth Revis, but I feel like that's less obvious. Does that make I feel like they don't see that as quickly as they do in the fantasy side of things.
Here's Cat Rambo again, this time talking about a series that kicks ass. And what science fiction books have you loved?
What science fiction books have I loved? I recently worked all my way through N.K. Jemisin's Wandering Earth series, or Wandering Moon trilogy, which just kicked ass, just crazy good. And I don't know, I'm going to say like I'm halfway, a third of the way into Scotto Moore's Battle of the Linguist Mages, which is crazy good. And I will just say, think of sentient punctuation marks and the Queen of Sparkle, the Queen of Sparkle Dungeon, and think of those combined, and you have that book. It's just crazy.
Yeah, that sounds pretty wild.
It's amazing.
I'll have to look that one up. Wole Talabi is a fantastic author of short fiction, probably most well known for his great short story, The Regression Test. I asked him which authors dazzle him.
Yeah, this is probably the trickiest question because a lot of people do. I think if I start listing them, we'll probably take up the rest of this video. And I struggle to highlight one because they've all dazzled me in different ways. So perhaps maybe instead of mentioning specific authors, I'll just mention things that authors do, right? Because I can be dazzled by many things, and I have been, right? I read lots of, especially short stories. I read a lot of short fiction, and I'm constantly dazzled by the creativity out there. Mostly unique ideas, unique, interesting ideas, and the more based in, extrapolation of current scientific theory they are, the more interesting I find them to be. Any deep and interesting reflections on the human condition, obviously from a speculative angle, those always dazzle me. Those always I find them very interesting. Captivating characters, even if the ideas are not that great, a really captivating character with a unique voice, I can go through a whole novel and I don't even need to have a plot or whatever. I just follow that character wherever. So yeah, those are probably the things that dazzle me. Sorry, I know that doesn't 100% answer the question, but yeah, if I start listing names, it's a really, really long list, and I'm bound to forget many.
What science fiction authors dazzle you?
One of them is Cat Valente, who I just keeps surprising me every single time and goes in different directions and hits it out of the ballpark every time. Another is the aforementioned N.K. Jemisin, who I just think is crazy good. Another is Tamsin Muir. I think I'm saying that correctly, who wrote Gideon the Ninth, which I just adore. And I was very happy to come through Clearing West with someone whose writing I just think is crazy good, which is Ann Leckie. I mean, she's amazing, and it was kind of nice to come through Clarion West with her, but also sort of very daunting in that, she published her book and she's just like, let me win every award this year. And you're just like, okay, Ann Leckie, you have hit all of these notes for us. None of It's so good. So really, really good.
Yeah, I really loved Ancillary Justice. And, Cat Valente was somebody I hadn't read before until this year. And she had the wonderful short story, which I believe is nominated, I forget if it's Emmy or Hugo, but The Sin of America. And it's, so good. Speaking of Octavia Butler, I love her short stories, especially Bloodchild. But I don't remember the last time I read a short story, and I read it 2 more times immediately after. It was such a captivating story.
Oh, I think that is rare when you come to when you find a writer that works both in long and short form with kind of equal ease and fluency. She's just crazy good.
Wole Talabi again.
And more recently as well, people like Nnedi Okorafor, who is doing, something that I also try to do, which is building out from our own African cultural sensibilities and philosophies and sciences into the more traditional mainstream science fiction and speculative fiction world. It's always good to see someone do the kind of thing you're trying to do, right? It's a bit of an example to follow. So yeah, she's influenced me recently. I really enjoy reading her work. And then people like China Mieville. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right. But Embassytown might be one of my favorite novels ever. When you talk about, creativity and, authors that dazzle you, that he would definitely be close to the top of the list, especially for Embassytown, which, some people, it's not a classic hard science fiction in the sense that it's not focused in detail on physics or chemistry or space flight or orbital mechanics. It's focused on linguistics and language and what that means and how it's used. And it's a brilliant novel that I constantly strive for that level of creativity and insightfulness and understanding and detail when writing science fiction.
Even more science fiction recommendations. Do you have any science fiction book recommendations for those who might be new to the genre, maybe just to get their feet wet?
Oh, absolutely. There is so many good works out there. I would say if you're looking for, something traditional and available in all the bookstores, start with the Valor novels by Tanya Huff. I think Valor's Choice is the first book. That's military science fiction, and she just nails it. She is so good on the military sci-fi. If that's not their thing, another book that you'll find on all the bookshelves would be Terminal Alliance by Jim Hines, who's an all-around great person. But he writes funny science fiction. It's a space adventure that, it stars a space janitor. So you just know it's going to be fun. And it doesn't matter who you are and how cranky you might be as a person, he's going to make you laugh out loud. So it's such a good book at bringing someone into science fiction. If you like ebooks, definitely that opens you up to the indie route. And you've got Jeff Chaney's written tons of great bestsellers, but my personal favorite of his series is The Last Reaper by Scott Moon and J.N. Chaney. And that's just good classic indie sci-fi that stars a larger-than-life hero who takes on challenges that are even larger. So it's just a fun series. And another series, you'll notice I always touch on post-apoc because that's probably one of my favorite subgenres that I read within it is the Slow Burn series by Bobby Adair. And it starts off, first book is Slow Burn. And he just knows how to tell a good zombie story. So that one is fun too.
That's great. And I'm expanding my reading list too, because you've given me a few names that I haven't read before. So this is excellent. That's great.
Great.
Thank you for watching. I'm Michael Leverts, and this is Fit to be Read.